We are back. We are in. This is Juan. That is Kyrin.
Yep.
We got Mere Mortals, episode 22, coming at ya. Pace of technology. Good. Exciting. I'm ready. Lots to talk about. This is the most notes I've ever made for a show.
Good.
Probably won't need them. Technology is in my DNA, I feel like.
Yeah.
Not that it's always been though, however. I think one thing probably people think about me now is that he's actually quite tech savvy. Not in a in-depth developer kind, but I'm aware of technology and the things that are going on.
Okay. Yep.
But there was a time in my life coming out of school where I thought to myself, I am never going to be doing technology. My dad, I know he listens to this. He's very much a tech guy. He was a developer, was all about tech, still all about tech. And I always thought, no, that's not for me. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, I've been working now for about 5 years in the predominantly technology and business space. So
yeah, damn. Well,
so it happens. But
I actually had a bit of a weird pride in not being able to use stuff, and I actually used it as an excuse. So, for example, when I was living as a renter in a share house, and the lady who I was renting from had TV and stuff. She wanted to connect her laptop to it. I'd always be like, oh, sorry, I don't really, I'm not good with technology. Like, you can get someone else to do that. So I always use an out to not needing to do stuff. So that was actually kind of good. Cool. Now, before we get into the Mere Mortals, if you see us sweating a little bit, our shirts changing colour. I'm in blue this week. You're in blue, I'm in grey, and this is already changing colour. We are in a room that gets real hot real quick. Yep. I also have my toucan swimming shorts on. Oh, I've got some toucan normal shorts on, which are going to get wet from our discussion. It's going to get liquidated. Good. Now, Mere Mortal moment of the week, Kyrin starts off. So mine was a realization, I guess, that relationships are not a passive thing. You can't go into them and just assume I'm in a relationship now, so it's going to be easy now. And I wouldn't say let down my guard, because that feels like a bit too aggressive or something, but it's something that you can improve and can be worked on. And so, I was a bit slack this week with, I suppose, messaging on Drea when she's in Colombia, and we had some days not messaging and stuff. And I sort of just felt myself personally, and then I could see in her reactions as well that we're, just drifting apart a little bit. Yep. So for me, it was okay, no, it's not a passive thing. You need to be actively involved, and you can make it better. Yeah. So I've just made a bit of a more conscious effort to, I suppose, still connect with her while we've got this distance between us until we're, it's a good meet point. Up again. Yeah. There's actually, getting a little bit out of topic, but there's 3 pillars. I was listening to a podcast about this. 3 pillars, I guess, of a relationship. One's sensuality. The other one I can't remember, but one's actually and more if I explain it, it'll make sense. When you first get into a relationship and everything's new and everything's exciting, so you're kind of motivated to do things because you don't know about the person you want to go out. Yeah. It's sort of the spontaneity of a relationship. Yeah. That's what sort of lacks after a certain period of time. Yeah. And it's one of the pillars that, this particular podcast was talking about, that you should enforce it and make sure that you're actively doing something, and not just, if you sit back, that part of the pillar is just going to go. Yeah. And it talks about relationships and marriages failing because of that. Yeah, makes sense. My Mere Mortal moment. Not so much a moment that was from the last week, but I'm shifting workplaces. So to those who don't know, I'm moving on from my current position as a senior consultant. I've been a consultant for a very long time now, for many, many years. If you ever wonder for a consultant what they do, it's hard to explain. Some people say, they try to explain it as there's doctors for humans. We are the equivalent for businesses. Yeah. It's a little bit egotistical for consultants to say, but any consultant listening to this will understand that. Yeah. Yeah, just shifting workplaces. So a little bit of a mindset shift, a Mere Mortal moment around, thinking, okay, what is next week going to come on board? Shifting a little bit of my, the way I normally just do my routine, just ensuring that I've got the right skills for it. So I'm still debating how I'm going to be going around. Don't have a particularly focused workplace. So it's going to be a little bit varied between whether I'm working on a bit of the north side of Brisbane, in the city, perhaps offsite. So yeah. That's probably the Mere Mortal moment, just trying to think, make sure I got the routine right and on track. Yeah, interesting. Good. Righto. Pace of technology. Before we kick into it, I don't know how long this podcast is going to go, because it could go for very long. So we'll try and keep it compact, short, special podcast. And exciting for you to enjoy. Now, definitions. Have you got some for us? Yeah, I went real deep this time. Oh, I like it deep. I went to the etymology of the word technology.
Very good.
So pace.
Hold on. Etymology.
Etymology, I
Is it
suppose, is
definition?
the root, where it originally came from,
Yep.
I suppose, or as far back as it can be traced with some sort of accuracy.
Yep.
So it was split into two parts. Both of them came from Greek originally, I guess. The first one was techne, which is like the art, skill, craft and work. So it's sort of like the designing of something, the pursuit of improving something.
Yeah.
And logia, or logia, I don't know how they would have said Greek. I don't speak Greek.
Logia.
Which was like a speaking, a discourse, a treatise, theory, doctrine, or science. So it was, if you combine those two together, I suppose it was the talking about the theory of a skill, and usually it was an applied skill or an applied art. So not something like a fine art, which you'd associate with like a painting or something. It was more something that's applied to the real world. Yep. And then I think that got changed into I guess like a definition for how humans interact with the world, and changing the world. That's like a technology.
Okay. Very interesting.
Pace,
very deep.
Yeah, and so pace is like a footstep. So it's like the footsteps of how humans are changing the world, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's cool. I like that. I like that description. My definition around it was, more around the law of accelerating returns. So the pace of technologies progresses, especially the information technology. So there's technology and then there's information technology, but it speeds up exponentially over time because there's a common force driving it forward. So it really it's to do with it's exponentially increasing based on the evolution and I guess the paces that humans take to it.
Yeah.
But there's some bits and bob that I was researching that I know myself around the discussion what if the pace of technology sort of oversteps evolution and what sort of looks into that. So interesting definition.
Keen to hear about that.
Hopefully it does us on a good pace.
Yeah.
So where do we begin?
All right. Well, I sort of decided I'd look at like the advancement of it in the past. So we might as well talk about that.
Would be a good point. Yeah, because mine are generally probably from the now future.
Future looking, yeah.
So I'd like to sort of hear a little bit of that backstory as well.
Yeah. So I just got this from it was like a encyclopedia, online encyclopedia. And it just had like a huge list of, I guess, like broken down chunks of time.
Yep.
And how technology's changed in that. So this is not particularly scientific, like in the sense of like this is exactly how it is, and this is how scholars of history and technology would put it.
Yep.
But as a general like rough point to go forward from. So we'll start with the Stone Age, which was about 3.4 million years ago to around 3000 BC, perhaps even around that period. And basically then it was, I suppose, technology could consider would be tools. So tools and the manufacturing or industry. So learning how to use corn, bake clay pots, create textiles, that sort of thing. So it's really basic, and you're looking at like, I suppose, the early Greek civilizations, probably like Australian and Aborigines and different places of the world, but none had really progressed to a certain extent. They'd all be still probably more in the hunter-gathering sort of stage, maybe slowly starting to form settlements and bigger cities. The Urban Revolution, which was 3000 BC to 500, and that was, I guess, like the invention of the city. So you wouldn't really think of a city as a technology, but if you're using it as like a definition of humans changing their environment, and that is like one of the biggest things you can do, which would absolutely terraformed places on the coasts particularly. That's
interesting. I say it's interesting because I know that you can also term a city like a symbiotic, like almost like not a human, but an individual, an entity, some sort of symbiotic thing, which makes it interesting that you can call the city a technology, but also like a living being. Yeah. Does it foretell that you can actually get two in the same, in the future or something like that?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I mean, I suppose like the way I could sort of justify it would be like, imagine if we created some sort of technology that could allow us to, I suppose, link minds in a way, and rather than cutting out all this bullcrap of speaking and typing and texting, it's like a wire going from my brain to your brain.
Yeah.
And then we create some kind of like, a cloud or a consciousness of minds.
Of understanding.
Would you call that a technology, or would that be something different? Not particularly sure, but definitely with that, I guess, grouping together of people that allowed specializations. So people who were previously, farming and having to go hunting and stuff could start creating their own like mini industries. So they started being able to use metalworking. So started using metal. From that, you can create plenty sorts of things, as well as ships. This was around the same time, like the first ships. So the technology of being able to communicate and transport was gradually getting better. Greece and Rome, so 500 BC to 500 AD. That was basically mechanical devices like the pump. Really started getting good at agriculture and using those metalworking techniques to create plows and to create objects that enhance like how much you can get from the soils.
And that's again, like to point out, that's technology. Like we were talking about there, it's to them that would have been their technology. That's their process and their technology. While it was a manual thing, like obviously now we see it as software.
Yeah, exactly.
And previously there was hardware. That was their version of technology, right? To be able to get dirt out of the ground, to be able to farm, whatever it may be. That was their technology of the day. But it sounds like it was at that point, post 500 BC, that it was starting to move from, technology being just as effort driven as in just an individual doing it to sort of multiplying what an individual could do.
Yeah. And I guess like benefiting more than just the individual. So the aqueducts of Rome, they're definitely like benefiting whole populations of people rather than just the individual. Building and transport also became way more insane then, I suppose, with better ships, better able to transport people via carts and horse-driven and stuff.
Yep.
The Middle Ages, 500 AD to 1750.
Ooh.
That seemed to be like technology then. I guess they were still gradually improving the techniques for iron, for example. They didn't particularly have iron back in the Roman days, but then they could start using that for other things. But it seemed to be like more centered around how we think and how we act.
Yep.
So it was like cultures, religion is where science was invented, like 1500s and the Renaissance, the Reformation, and the steam engine was starting to, it was a thing roughly around that time. Next comes the Industrial Revolution, and I suppose that's when you can start really thinking of technologies as starting to be more like, I guess, getting smaller and smaller. So that allowed like obviously power to become widely available to everyone.
Yep.
So with the windmill engines, so first cars were being developed in the 1800s, something like that.
First cars.
Yeah, like the Fords. When were they?
Henry T.
They
Ford.
definitely
I think it was
had
1918.
Yeah.
No,
they
1908.
Yeah, they would have
early
had them
1900s.
before World War One.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, I think it was 1908. Something rings to mind. Yeah, it's early 1900s.
Round about that period. 20th century, I suppose, and this is just my own definition now. So that was like, the atomics, using the atomic bomb, being able to split the atom, beginning of computers towards the end. Do you know when the first smartphone came out? That was 2008?
The first way before that. Because the first smartphone wasn't actually Apple's iPhone. Yeah. There was something beforehand that was considered a smartphone. Okay. But it just wasn't popular enough to really take over. But then the iPhone, I guess is like the consumable smartphone that came out, and then people started using it. Not entirely sure the actual date.
Because I remember being 16 at high school and I still had like a Motorola
Razr or Flip or something.
Yeah, I never actually got a flip phone. I missed out on that.
Well, you can get them now with the foldable phones. Foldable glass ones.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
They're coming back in fashion.
Yes. And then I've just put from now onwards. So that's getting into I suppose what will be in the future. Nano, virtual reality, different types of drugs and stuff. How we communicate is going to become very different.
No, it's cool. I mean, that's I like that. I like that setup. That sets us up well from what's happened historically and then moving forward. Yeah. To kind of bring it back into a little bit more of consumable for people to understand that we're talking about, explain to everyone, I can start as well, and I'll get you to sort of take on afterwards as well. what does the pace of technology to you have been since, like, from as young as you can remember to today? And like for me, the way that I would explain it, and people who are listening to us who are younger, maybe 5 years younger, might not understand this, but I recall a time when there wasn't mobile phones, when there was internet, but you didn't really use it. And the pace of technology just in what it would be 15 years to me seems so ludicrous in terms of changes that people who, were born post 2000s, will always be in this digital native era. Like they don't know a life without a phone or a smartphone, or the connecting would also take away your phone usage.
Yeah.
But even in the last, 5 or so years, where both the rise of a lot of social media platforms or essentially what is just the new internet, because it's taking over essentially all other platforms, everyone's sort of consuming information through those platforms. It's getting rid of normal traditional mediums like the newspaper, like TV. I'll give you an example of something that I was listening to today. 10 years ago for us, we would have consumed TV and movies quite a lot.
Yep.
I think the stat was Netflix, as of last year, spent $12 billion in creating their own content in terms of just shows and that. And it's more than 10 years ago what all TV companies and like stations combined together spent to make content. So it's just a ludicrous amount now being done by just this sort of software company essentially at the pace of technology that has increased from then. Another sort of example in terms of the pace, I remember sending a picture in high school would take like a minute or two for some pixelated mess. Like it would just take forever. Where we're talking about now, I've just ordered the Samsung S20 Ultra with such ridiculous stats on it. And once 5G comes along, you're almost going to be able to send 8K video, which is essentially going to be gigabytes worth of information just like in seconds. So even to me, the pace of technology seems huge. And I can just imagine individuals who have come before us or a lot older than us, I guess, they would see it even more so, I think. And it's something I wanted to talk about, but I'll get your thoughts on. Have you experienced something similar to that? Have you got any particulars that you think from a technology perspective, okay, that's changed a lot?
Yeah, it's just a couple of moments I really remember of that stick out in my mind. I remember the very first video I watched on the internet. Which I guess would have been the very first video. I mean, so we had TV, so it would have been the first thing that I could choose to watch, I suppose, ever, which was, it wasn't, I don't think YouTube was around yet. I think it was Google had a video page or something like that.
Oh, okay.
And it was YouTube. And it just had like a bunch of listed videos. And they were so simple, man. They were, someone doing a backflip and kicking a ball. I think there was one of the ones I remember was an X-Men series, like a cartoon series with a dub over it, and it was about the Juggernaut. Juggernaut. And oh man, it was so funny. Me and my friends just absolutely loved it. So that was, I suppose, one of the a vivid moment for me, remembering like what it used to be. I suppose there was a point not too long ago actually where I realized just how much I was consuming via YouTube, and this was when I started like stretching and then listening to podcasts, and that opened up like a whole just
arena of things.
That just made me realize like, oh, okay, wow, I'm not I really don't know as much as I sort of thought I did, I guess, or it just really impressed on me just how much stuff there is out there.
And I mean, like, I think we've listened to enough things that it allows us to have this discussion, but you're right, the pace of technology in comparison to like 5 years ago, or maybe a little bit more, you would have like finite amount of information available. And that's why I was talking about information technology, and I'll sort of get into it in a minute. But, 5 years ago, realistically, you're going to get a lot of information from, online. There might be some videos on it. There might be some people talking about it on podcast form. University might be the other point. But, to now, and I think I was looking at some stats last year, I think it was, or the year before that, 2018, there was 320,000 podcasts. As of this year, or at the end of 2019, there was 790,000 odd, right? So,
Yeah.
like, the volume of information
Yeah.
across technology being used is just so huge to be able to consume and learn from, that it's just multiplying in ridiculous fashions. So there's something here I want to talk about, because it is around the pace of technology. Have you heard about the knowledge doubling curve?
Moore's law?
Oh, well, it is not Moore's law. So Moore's law is the doubling in terms of speed and the size of the chip and speed
the
around
cost.
that. But this is much more about the knowledge
Okay, no.
of doubling it. So I think the pace of technology also, I would say, comes around with the doubling curve of knowledge. And this is an interesting one, so I'll sort of read through it.
Yeah.
It sort of came from a Critical Path book from 1981 from the futurist and inventor. So it's already quite old, right? But it still holds true today as it did then.
Okay.
By R. Buckminster Fuller. What a name. So he estimated that if we took all the knowledge that mankind had accumulated and transmitted by the year 1 as equal to 1 unit of information, it took about 1,500 years until the 16th century for that amount of knowledge to double.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
right? From literally year 0 and 2,020 years ago
Yeah.
to it took 1,500 years for it to double. The next doubling of the knowledge from 2 to 4 in the knowledge unit took only 250 years. Then by 1900, it'd be, so 150 years later, knowledge had doubled again to 8 units. So the observed speed at which information doubled was getting actually faster and faster.
Yeah, yeah.
In modern times, exponential knowledge progressions therefore change at an ever-increasing rate. Essentially, what it's sort of talking about, and it still holds true, is that it's exponentially going up in terms of the acceleration at which knowledge gets produced, and it has been even more pronounced on the pace of technology. So a lot of those changes from 0 to 1,500, like I think you talked about historically, technology was there, and the technology helps drive a lot of information and knowledge sharing.
Yeah.
But as it's started to, the social media of today, or sort of the web 2.0 or 3.0, whatever it's up to, it's allowed knowledge to be shared so quickly. And then there was a piece here that was talking about that this fast rate of knowledge doubling leads up to the basic proposed hypothesis of the technological singularity.
Yeah.
So it's the rate at which technology progression surpasses human biological evolution.
Do you know what units we're at right now?
So I didn't actually go into the calculation of it, but if it's doubling, the last one that I sort of saw was 150 years had doubled to 8 units by 1900.
Yeah.
So we could do some rough calculations,
not.
but it'd be in like the hundreds.
Yeah.
But it sort of what it talked about was, if you could get a unit of measure for all the humans on Earth and the knowledge that we have, it's going to get to a point that the amount of knowledge being produced surpasses what can even be consumed by humanity. And
Yeah.
it's just going to keep increasing and increasing. And it sort of talked about, even though it was such a 40 years old book, it sort of related itself to the pace of technology just increasing and increasing.
Yeah.
And then when we talk about things like artificial intelligence and the robots taking over, I think it was really critical to talk about information technology, because it's going to come a point when, theoretically, if you had machines who can consume this knowledge a lot better than human biology can, they're just going to be able to consume the knowledge that we can't. Like, we just cannot, based on evolution. Even if we tried to do whatever it was, we just are not going to be able to keep up with the amount of knowledge and information being shared.
Yeah.
And I think, looking at that, I know we talked about this in a previous podcast around universities, if it's worth it or not. This sort of knowledge doubling curve is going to make that idea more and more so that knowledge is just evolving at such a speed that it's just very difficult to keep up to it if you're not really just staying at a higher level, as opposed to getting really in depth and being a really deep skilled individual. Where that's sort of stuff that artificial intelligence is going to be able to take over, and it's not going to be a need for a human to be doing it, because we just can't keep up with the pace.
Yeah.
So I thought it was interesting. Actually, I noted that down as a book that I wanted to read a little bit more in detail. Critical Path by R. Buckminster Fuller.
Okay,
So
yeah,
should have a bit of a read. So
Just while we're on Moore's law,
Yep.
I'll just go through one thing I read about it. So yeah, like you mentioned, it was based on computing chips, and it was every 2 years they half in size and also half in cost,
Yep.
and that's been like really consistent since I think it was like 1950s when he first came up with it. And this actually isn't like a special case of just this one thing proving that technology is moving at this exponential pace. So in Ray Kurzweil's 2005 book, the singularity is near, which from researching this, I wanna research it. Well. He's got graphs, very similar graphs with sort of a log scale on the y-axis, x-axis, whatever it's measuring, and it'll be x-axis would be time.
Mm-hmm. And y-axis would be what uptake or knowledge or units or whatever.
Yeah, so the magnetic data storage has gone up. Mm-hmm. The DNA sequence data, like how much of the genome you can process information.
Well, just quickly on that genome. So to give you an idea, the full genome sequencing, right, today is around, it can be done by a few $100s, and that's a lot of information, but it can be done by a few $100s. It was a couple of $1,000s in 2015, when it cost millions in 2006, and when it was first done in 2003, it was billions of dollars to do the sequencing. So from 2003 to now, it's gone from billions of dollars
rapidly,
to a couple of $100s.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I guess all of these sort of stem from that darting of the computing chips, because that's how we're using basically all of these other things, because they allow us to store what we know, but also with internet bandwidth and the wireless data, I suppose the cost of it as well just goes crazy. So yeah, that was just like it's very obvious in modern times, and I suppose when we use the word technology now, we're talking more about the computing side of it rather than the using a stone tool to break open the marrow from a bone or whatever.
True. But that's where it's grown from as well, right? And before I sort of stuck, because when you talk pace of technology, and I think we've talked a little bit about historically, right? When you start looking into the future, you'll start looking into artificial intelligence, virtual reality, where's it going to go, where's that pace going to take us. I thought I'd give a little bit of context as well. I think you might be familiar with this just in terms of artificial intelligence. Are you aware of sort of where it really started from, machine learning and everything?
Maybe like the chess programs they were first doing.
Oh, close, no, but I thought you might know this one. More so during the Second World War. Okay. So the British computer scientist, you might know him as Alan Turing.
Yeah.
So he was work to crack the Enigma code. Yeah. So in working to actually crack that Enigma code, the Bombay machine that we used to decipher that was the foundations of machine learning. So that's where they began that machine learning and has evolved from there in terms of having sort of an imitation game or a machine learning game that can crack a code of some kind. So I think, you see things. And that's where sort of in the pace of technology can be from other areas of life, whether it's war, whether it's building bombs or cracking codes, that then pace of technology can come out from anyways and just start speeding up and taking on from there.
Yep.
So I wanted to lay the groundwork for that because I've got two topics that I want to talk to you about. One is the mobility revolution, because I think that's one piece where the pace of technology is going to change quite quickly.
Yep.
But the first one I want to get into is the anthropomorphic robotics revolution.
Damn.
It's a little bit of a wording. So it's the timing for robotic hardware systems and sensors.
Yeah.
Computing, communications, and cloud services. And artificial intelligence, a human-like robotic ability. So I think we're at a point in time now where a lot of those things are now starting to come to play, and the pace of them is making it available to have robots that are starting to move away from what they term the back office, the warehouse robots, to like out in the open, greenfield, working with humans type robots.
Yeah.
I think the pace of technology there is probably the more scary one. And I think we've talked this in the past. I think the pace of technology from a cloud perspective, from artificial intelligence, from ethical intelligence in robots, we're going to start seeing the biggest changes, I think, over the next 5-10 years, where, things like Amazon uses, I believe, I don't know if it's 100%, but a lot of their really big warehouses have no humans.
Okay.
It is pure robots. If you haven't seen a video, it's essentially room. What are they called? Like Roomba.
Like the little vacuum.
Yeah. So imagine those things. They just have fairly massive ones, and they run an automated warehouse.
Okay, that's cool.
So it's absolutely automated.
Yeah.
That's all back end, right? That's been done now for a couple of years. They're progressing at a speed. It's quite likely that the pace of technology is now going to allow them to be forefront of mind and being out in the open, where you can start seeing them potentially, you go to a local diner and you're not going to have a chef anymore. It is a robot chef.
Yeah.
There is no real difference between having a chef and a robot chef. If you're a chef and you're listening to this, it's quite
Get a
likely
new job.
it's quite likely going to have to reskill yourself because that is going to go. Couple of the notes for this one. Just the robot muscle. I think was one of the from the Novell actuators for gripping. That's one of the things that sort of has been, again, exponentially been growing. I think a couple of years ago it noted that the ability for robots to grip was a really hard thing. So they could do like clamping down, but they couldn't do essentially the anthropomorphic movement of hands and that.
Yeah.
That's starting to now come at such a fast pace that it's not an issue anymore. Okay. They can get them to be dexterous and opening doors and everything.
Yeah.
And so the question there of the pace of technology is it's not if it can happen, it's now when it's going to happen. And I think it's just taking... it's going to come through and just take over a lot of things. Not sure if you've read anything or have any comments around that one.
I just remember one of the things like that Jordan Peterson was saying was that the thing that really stopped robots for a while was we thought it was quite easy to see and to acknowledge the boundaries between things. What is a thing?
Yep.
And that sight part was actually a lot harder than the actual physical movements of objects and deciphering the world rather than moving through it. I don't really know where that's at nowadays, although I suppose it's getting a lot better with them being able to, create faces of humans just based on merging of photos, like a database of photos. And have you ever been to that website where you just click through it and it's basically like images of people? But every now and then, like you can see something a little bit wrong with like one of the hair or the ears or the nose or something. And it's basically just every single photo is just a human that's been created. And they're like, they're amazing quality pictures. And all of them it's just been a person created by the machine based on whatever, and it can make old people, young people, whatever.
Yeah, I have seen that actually.
It's pretty cool, yeah.
Okay, which is also freaky. But
yeah.
So that one to me is like, okay, pace of technology, people should be aware of that. If you're essentially, because that's going to change the face of, I think, a lot of workforces and a lot of things. But the next one, like the one I mentioned earlier, I think is going to change fundamentally a lot of things, like in a big way. And the pace of technology, I think is going to have the most. So if you're Elon Musk, I think you're in a perfect position. I'll give you a little bit of idea of Elon Musk. In 2015, he was worth, I believe, something in the order of like $4 billion or $3 billion.
Yeah.
Lots of money, 2015. If you don't know Elon Musk, he was the co-creator. Well, he actually started a company called X.com, which merged with PayPal. He was the biggest owner of PayPal when it sold out to eBay, part of the PayPal mafia at the time, is what they call them in Silicon Valley. I think he made $300 million from that PayPal sale. In 2015, he was worth about $4 billion. He is in the Tesla and SpaceX side of things, and that has been going gangbusters since 2015. He is now number 26 in the world of the richest man. He's $40 billion net worth.
Yeah.
And they're predicting that Tesla shares, which are currently at $800, where $190 could reach $10,000.
Okay, well that's just
it's going silly. So and why I'm talking about this one is because he could be one of the most powerful people in the world if this continues, which I believe it will. So it's a mobility revolution. So I'll read you a piece. I think it's the exponential advance of multiple supporting technologies driving us towards a mobility revolution. So not so much about autonomous cars and drones. I don't even think about that. So autonomous cars are happening.
Yeah.
Autonomous drones already exist. Like I've worked on projects that are doing this.
Yeah.
That's fine. It's more around any vehicle will be smart and assist in navigation, communication, safety, and more. So any vehicle will be able to connect and communicate to other vehicles and to humans. Any vehicle will function with intelligence. So I think that's this particular piece of technology thought I think is going to change a lot of things, because just think about it at the now. There was taxis. Taxis evolved into, I guess, Ubers. You got Uber and taxi. You still got the human interaction.
Yeah.
Quite likely, and currently they're battling it out, the Googles, the Amazons, and Tesla, to, just replace the human piece in that Uber sort of area, and you just have cars that are going around on their own. They go even steps beyond that. So a vehicle could be a car, could be a plane, could be a train, could be a boat. All of these things are going to be able to be autonomous. To the point of, there is no human need or interaction for moving anyone around anywhere.
Yeah, just on that. So when I worked in the mining industry, that was actually starting to become a lot more prevalent. So in Rio Tinto, I remember there'd always be like sort of constant announcements in my 3 years that I worked for them, there'd be, the iron ore trains in the Pilbara are now fully autonomous. So they have, no one in the physical, like loading, like the driving seat of the train.
Who drives them?
I
Are
think
they completely automated, or they're running offsite?
I think they probably were a mixture of like offsite and just automated.
Yep.
So instead of having like maybe 4 people on the train, one driving, one on the back, and 2 like fixing stuff that goes wrong, they might have taken all of that out and just one maybe mechanic at loading stations or something.
Because the one that I've seen now, right, and that's where, and it can go wildly beyond here. Like if that's where we are now, I've seen the use of drones out in mine sites. The drone sort of surveys and pushes back virtual reality data to individuals sitting 5,000 kilometers away. All the trucks are automated, but the drone's connected to the trucks so that it knows when it needs maintenance, and the drones are doing the maintenance with other drones. So it's starting to become like there's no human. This thing can just run without humans. It's just doing its own thing.
Yeah.
And that is just like the absolute beginning of that mobility revolution.
Yeah. Another little story just on this. When they first introduced some of the autonomous trucks, so they're massive trucks, and the wheels are double my height,
double your height,
double my height, super thick. And what one of the problems they were actually having was they were having like a lot of breakdowns with the wheels, and it was like a certain type of wear and tear on the wheel.
Yep.
And what they actually found out was the GPS coordinating like system of this was so good that the trucks were driving to like within a millimeter on the same haul path the whole time. So basically they were wearing ruts into the road.
Nice.
Of with their wheels, and so they actually had to add in I'm not sure what you call it, like a redundancy, like an error margin.
Like an error to make sure that they didn't keep on doing so perfectly.
They'd move across the road like a little bit, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous when I first heard of that.
But it's a thing, right?
Yeah.
Now, do you have any particular topics? So what I've printed out a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. Just want to make sure I've got them right. Yeah, I've got them right. So it's from a article or journal article published on Nature.
Okay.
If you know what Nature is. Do you know what Nature is?
Magazine.
It is.
It used to be a magazine. Maybe
it's a journal. It's an article like where you can publish, but it's the most highly respected journal. Okay. So if you get things on there, it's a big deal. From 2016, when it talked about the technological change that's sort of accelerating today and unprecedented pace. And I've got a couple of things on there that I was like, it'd be pretty cool to have a look at it. I'll name a couple of them. So computing power. So it's got a couple of stats on there, and I can sort of share with you afterwards. But sort of talk about computer power is one, and we've talked about it now. That's just accelerating at a linear pace that it talks about here, but linearly against a bit of a different y coordinate. I think it's talking about from going.
It'd be a log, wouldn't it?
Well, I think the y scale is logged. Yeah. So it's in that
so the exponential pace.
The other one's really big data. So data's even going faster, and I think that's what we talked about, the doubling. So if the speed of the computing power is going up, the big data of it is going even faster. That pace is just like going even crazier. Communication speed. So the performance and scale of the internet's improving, as we were sort of talking about. Broadband and Wi-Fi, just if you imagine it 10 years ago to today, it's just chalk and cheese. You're not waiting to download a photo. You're essentially waiting to download hundreds of gigabytes. Can you imagine doing a podcast 20 years ago?
No,
you couldn't even share. Imagine these files are like 100 megabytes or whatever. There was no floppy disk that was holding 100 megabytes worth of information. That's for sure.
Out of interest is another funny little anecdote. So your mum lent me a CD, an old CD called La Pelota de Letras.
La Pelota de Letras.
And it's like it's a comedy, basically a Colombian comedy, I assume. Yep. Was it from Colombia? Yeah. And she gave me the CD, and I was like, oh yeah, cool, I'll check it out. None of the laptops in our house, basically, I was thinking, okay, I'll just plug this into my laptop. Oh, no, wait, it doesn't have a CD port. I'll just use my brother's. Oh, it doesn't have a CD port. Yeah. So I was going around, I was thinking, I'm not sure I actually have something I can use here.
To even listen to this.
To put this in.
Yep.
If I could whip out one of the old PlayStations, and I think my dad's setup computer actually has a port on it, and his computer's old now, so I'm guessing...
It might be able to.
The new Macs, like the full desktop computers, probably wouldn't have a CD port.
A CD port. Interesting. A couple of the other ones that they sort of mentioned was talking devices. Again, 20 years ago, you wouldn't even have thought of talking devices. Like, you would have thought, if you look back at the movies like Knight Rider or anything where you're talking to the car, those old school, like, people would be like, oh, how weird.
Yeah.
I mean, you're doing
HAL
that.
and Space Odyssey.
Yeah. So, but now, you do that to your phone and your car's starting to do that too. Like, it's just commonplace.
Yeah.
So that's changed dramatically. We talked about, I guess, biology booming and the amount of sort of DNA and the genome sequencing that you can do and the speed of it.
Yep.
And then they like it printed, so the 3D printing that's sort of come into play.
Yeah, I haven't heard much of that. That used to be like, this is going to be the biggest thing ever.
Well, it has now. You can, I know that I've read stuff about that you can print out guns, fully functioning guns.
Yeah, yep.
You can also do full printouts of artificial sort of replacements for body parts. So that's been done as well. I knew a guy that I used to work with. He would 3D print quite a lot of things. He made a 3D printed keyboard. He would 3D print things for his bike when they broke and stuff like that. So, people are kind of using it. I think it's still in its infancy.
Yeah.
Perhaps when the speed of some of the data transports starts to get better, because you need to be quite skilled at using the software to create 3D printing.
Yeah.
Perhaps when it starts getting a little bit easier or there's more marketplace for sharing, it might become broader. But it's still fairly expensive to buy a 3D printer, like a good 3D printer and the material that comes along with it.
For sure.
So, and then the rise of the robots, which we've talked about heaps. There's their future focus. This is a 2016 prediction from Gil Pratt, the head of Toyota Research Institute of Palo Alto. He said that he sees a possible Cambrian explosion with a rapid period of incredible matureness and diversification, with robots communicating with each other about 100 million times faster than humans ever could, allowing them to build out more robots at lightning speed. So that's sort of what he saw the future.
Yeah.
I think there's probably ways that, yes, they could build themselves and stuff like that, but I totally agree that with the pace of technology that it is today, it is going to come to a point that the communications between things, because it's really going to be the technology and the broad everything, like, between your phone and your car, and, then the car to the train's linked to, to the train or something like that. They're going to be communicating at such speeds that you're just not part of it anymore. It's probably going to help humanity in a lot of ways. I don't see it as dystopian, though, as, what some other people see it. I think the pace of technology, I see it as a good thing. I don't see it as a bad thing.
Yeah.
So I've seen it from my personal experience. I think it's been fantastic to see how things change so quickly. Just I'm super excited for the Samsung S20 Ultra.
Yeah, for sure.
In 15 years ago, you wouldn't have imagined that a phone camera would ever have 108 megapixels. So it's insane. Yeah. That's a good thing. So do you see the pace of technology as a bad thing, or the pace of it that it's going?
Not particularly. Not particularly. I definitely enjoy, as much as anyone does, all the associated obvious benefits from it. So, increase better healthcare, better communications, better transport, better whatever. There are probably some dangers lurking with the way it can be going, and I'll get into that one actually right now. So I won't put any judgments on. It's probably a whole different episode on that. But it can actually become too slow sometimes and too fast.
Ooh, too slow.
Yeah, so
you're growing exponentially faster than all of human biology. It's just developing so quickly.
So one of the things that I was reading on was the male birth control, and so you never hear of this. When's the last time you talked?
I haven't, but I've been watching way too many things and know a lot of information about the male sort of birth pill and everything like that.
Okay,
give me a bit of info.
All right, well, I don't have that much on it other than the fact that, it's people have been working on it since I think it was proposed in the 1930s, probably, not too long after the female birth control. And it seems to be there is a demand for it. If that was available, a lot of guys would use it for sure.
Yep.
And it just seems to be there's a weird mix of bad incentives, no money going to it, that it's sort of stagnant. It hasn't really gone anywhere. Yeah, look, it's an interesting point. I've been reading a book called Accidental Feminist. Okay. It's actually a fair book that gives you a view from the other perspective, and it talks about the male contraception as opposed to the female contraception. One point that I guess they make clear is it would be good if it existed, I think, for males, and I think
people go and suggest like it would be good, but it gets shut down quite a bit because realistically, from a marketing perspective, humanity as a whole, just in the way that the male female balance has been for a lot of years, and then whether it's rightful or not, that gets pushed onto the female as like, okay, well, you can take on this brunt to do so, and the guy can be scot free and doesn't have to take it. Is it the right thing? Probably not. Would it be beneficial if we had a male contraception and then people had to go and do that? Yeah, fantastic. One of the reasons they actually stopped pursuing one particular male contraception, which was working really well, was males were getting dizzy, a bit nauseous, and they felt a bit sick from taking the contraception. So I said, oh, well, no, that can't work.
Yeah.
But equivalently, the pill does exactly that for females.
Yeah,
so it was a bit of they allowed it for females, but they didn't want it because it was for males.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a bit shitty. Like, I think the option should be there for that. But that's, I saw this particular little sort of show on it, and they sort of talk about that 25, 30 years ago they'd already had like this. They had big news media outlets of, yep, it's coming, it's here, and essentially just it gets brought up every so often, but it doesn't really ever get progressed.
Yeah. I mean, it's not I suppose like a dislike or a disclaimer or a negative that it hasn't been produced. I was just thinking like, it is a need that's out there. I'm sure there's plenty of people. I actually haven't thought about it enough to know like where my limit would be. Like, if it made me nauseous, would I really want to use it or blah blah blah. But that was just one of the things that sort of came up.
Yep.
Vice versa, the other way would be when it's going too fast, and so this is where you can have unintended consequences due to the lack of trial and error. Yep. So one of the big examples of this was the Ford Pinto, which was a Ford car that they put out in, I'm not going to guess, the 70s, but it could have been any other time. And it had like some problems with it. It was like a subcompact car, and apparently when it was getting rear-ended, just the way they designed the gas tank down below, it sort of could spontaneously catch on fire.
Yeah, okay.
And so they had this massive recall for it at some point. It actually sort of seemed like, digging a bit deeper, that it was a combo of just bad publicity for it, and it was dangerous in one way, but not that much more dangerous than all the other cars. Not like everyone was dying because they were driving this car.
Yep.
I think it was like almost equal, was 1.4% of cars people were using was this car, and 1.4% of deaths were from this car. So it's not like it was more. But that was just one of the ways in which like can technology go too fast and ultimately lead to a bad end.
Bad outcomes. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Which, I suppose you could definitely see. You could potentially say the social media with the rise of the communications. Maybe it's going too fast and we're not yet adapted to
converse in that way.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's just interesting seeing how quickly it is all going and where it will go from here.
Yeah. Well, have you got anything else that you want to talk about? Because I wanted to end it on some stats in the social media space.
Stats.
I did a little bit of a digging around, so I thought, I've seen some information out there, but I really wanted to understand what that pace looks like and how much time is spent. So we're not going to be talking about social media now. So I went and did some digging around, and this research took a little while. I might put it together in a bit of a visual so it's easier to understand, and it's across 8 platforms. Firstly, I went and found out all the monthly active users of all these platforms, all over the place. The per day users, so that's, any month, how many are actually using it per day?
Yeah.
What's the average time spent in each of these platforms? The total time that equates to as a population using the platform.
Yeah.
And then, when I thought I had to calculate this, I was like, I wouldn't have to do this. That also then ended up calculating how much time in years each day we use these platforms.
Yeah.
Not as an individual, as a society, as human population.
Okay.
The least of them was Twitter. By my calculation, the human population uses Twitter 190 years in one day.
One day.
So that's how much of total human time is spent on
2 lifetimes.
Yeah, in one day on Twitter. LinkedIn, 152 years. So those are fairly close. I thought that's what all the numbers were going to be, right? That's what you maybe expect. It's like 2 lifetimes as well, all in one day. Seems right. But then it cranks up quite high. YouTube, 2,200 years
Yeah.
in one day. Okay,
that.
that's starting to crank up. Snapchat, 16,000 years, 16,764 years.
Didn't even know Snapchat was still a
Yeah.
thing.
Instagram, 25,685 years.
Yeah.
Then I looked at our faithful TikTok. And I'm like, okay, this, TikTok, to people who don't know it, this only came out realistically 3 years ago from Musical.ly. It's since then been the highest downloaded app last quarter, higher than anything. It's on the top of the charts. 44,000 years in one day. So quite high. And then we get up to the big two. There's Facebook and WeChat.
Yeah.
Facebook amassed 101,000 years in one day. But WeChat is actually still the highest because the only thing that differentiated them is monthly active users for Facebook is 2.5 billion.
Yeah.
And they have 1.4 billion people using it per day. But the time spent is generally about 38 minutes. But on WeChat, they've only actually have about 1 billion people per day, but people spend about 58 minutes to 65 minutes, and that equates to 125,000 years worth of effort, human effort in the one day.
Yeah.
What it sort of made me think is, because when we're talking about historical stuff and you think of technology, you think back all the way to medieval times or aqueduct times, and you were talking about to the multiplication of information and technology. Back then, the aqueduct could only, produce outcomes for maybe 100 people or 200 people, or as it grew, a couple of thousand people and whatever else.
Yeah.
But the technology and the input of individuals can only grow at such scale. Where now we're seeing, platforms or what's essentially just the next, wave of the internet. You can have, data of the equivalent of being used of 125,000 years in one day.
Yeah.
That pace for one individual to consume is just, you're not going to be able to consume that. Robots starting to come through are going to be able to consume that and multiples of it more. As we move on this sort of information or, platforms of being used or information, being shared from services and autonomous vehicles and everything, it's just going to scale at such a speed and rate that I think the numbers will make even less sense. It'll make nothing. The amount of times I say all your... if all the cars in the streets are connecting to each other, to all the planes, to all the boats, there'll be gigabytes, terabytes of information just flying everywhere that to you and me mean zero. But to machines and robots out there are going to be able to just take control of that and be able to create massive outcomes for humanity.
Yeah, so they're already high enough that I sort of don't care anymore.
Yeah, when I started saying some of these numbers, right? When I genuinely thought it was going to be around 100 years, 200 years. And when it started getting up to 125,000 years, I thought... this means nothing anymore. To me, it's just conceptually, and that's why I wanted to do an infographic to go, the amount of time that we use, say our WeChat or Facebook scales all the way back to beyond the pyramids, beyond all this. Imagine if you were literally a person sitting in, whatever, not even ancient Egypt, it's freaking
in a cave.
Whatever it may be. That since that day, it'd be a human putting information or use all the way till today.
Yeah.
So it's just ridiculous, just ridiculous. So anyways, that's my thoughts
cool.
on pace technology. I think we could go in deeper into a lot of things, but I wanted to keep it generalistic based on our info.
Yeah, no, we'd be getting into different topics, I think, if we actually did that.
So very good. Excellent. Now.
Good. Fitness challenge.
And
Juan, he's nervous, looking at me sweating.
No, well, I'm taking this heat, but you know as well as I do that I finally cracked a bit of a puppy here. Let me just move this microphone here. I finally cracked it. Finally got myself moving away from the episode numbers.
Into the 20s.
Into the 20s. It was the faithful 100 meter, the 1 kilometer run. Ooh. I am now tying with the episode numbers. So we've both now achieved all points for the 1 kilometer run. We had to run sub 3:15.
Yep.
That was done fairly straightforward. Just had to get myself out there and doing some 1 kilometer runs. So been enjoying it. Excellent. Kyrin Dan also rubbed it off. Now I know personally that he's gotten one. He's gotten two.
So last week we didn't include the squats, which we did.
Of course.
And I did another thing this week, so I'm on 28 now.
28.
So
28.
I did squats 4x8 at 105 kilos.
Nice.
Today I did my first handstand push-up.
I was
really happy with.
Clean.
Yeah, I'd need to see it on video.
Yep.
I probably didn't have like my legs fully straight, but I definitely got
We're
down
counting
to
it.
the floor and
Yep.
back up. And I also did 4 press to stands.
Oh, no, you were really close to that as well, I know.
Yeah,
And you
yeah.
almost got the handstand one as well today.
Yes, yeah. I was.
You were raging on the points.
72 seconds,
Oh.
and I needed 75 seconds. A minute 15.
Yeah, almost
So,
there. You're almost there.
Very
good.
close. Very close. But
Well, I'm glad to see we're both in the 20s now.
Yeah,
the
yeah,
pace
for
of
sure.
the pace of technology is definitely outpacing us in this fitness challenge because we're moving quite slowly. But don't you worry. You know how we were talking about when we originally started this? We were like, "Oh yeah, we're going to get to a point that it's going to get real quick. Like it's going to scale up." I'm like,
it's still coming.
Where's this
Still
going?
coming.
"All right, very good."
I'll draw a graph of our points per week getting towards the
Transition.
end. It's going to be exponential.
It's
for sure.
exponential, easy. We'll beat the pace of technology. We'll be doubling it up.
Yeah.
All right, that's all from us. Episode 22. If you've gotten this far, make sure you're subscribing either on YouTube, either on the Spotify's, on the Apple if you use that's such a thing.
Yep.
You know, go on the Facebooks, go on the Instagram, go on the. Do we have it anywhere else? Everywhere. Just go everywhere. Go everywhere. Not even on our stuff. Just go on it. You know, join the 120,000 years worth of work that's going in good use. So
old John in China is he's racking up those hours. You got to keep up with him.
you got to keep up with it. Yeah, easy. All right, that's all. One out.
Very good. Kyrin out.